All right, let's get into it. Today, we're tackling a huge topic in human geography, agriculture. I mean, this is fundamental stuff, right? We're going to break down how we feed ourselves, how we organize our land, and the massive questions we face about the future of food. And let me tell you, these concepts are absolutely crucial for that AP exam. So here's our game plan. First, we're going to look back at the big revolutions that totally changed how we farm. Then we'll see how you can literally read that history on the landscape. After that, we'll zoom out to the global economy and wrap up with the major challenges we're dealing with right now.
Okay, Chapter 1. To really get a grip on where we are today, you've got to go back to the beginning. We're going to trace the three huge transformations that built the world of agriculture as we know it.
Now, the first thing that should just jump out at you here is the timescale. I mean, look at that massive gap between the first revolution and the next two. It's huge. The second and third revolutions, they happened in what feels like a blink of an eye, historically speaking, and they were both sparked by the same thing, the Industrial Revolution.
So, that first revolution, it was the game changer. For the first time, instead of just hunting and gathering, we started deliberately planting seeds and taming animals. What does that mean? It means we could finally stop wandering around and build permanent homes. This is the moment that makes cities, civilizations, and, well, everything else possible. And it all kicked off in these key spots, these agricultural hearths like the Fertile Crescent.
You know, when you boil it all down, farming really comes down to one of two big strategies. On one hand, you've got intensive agriculture. Think about it like a small garden where you put in a ton of work, labor, money, fertilizer, to get the most out of that little patch of land. Then you've got extensive agriculture. Picture huge cattle ranches in Texas. It's a massive amount of land, but with way less input per acre. And this one little difference, it shapes pretty much everything that follows.
This right here is the perfect way to see the huge shift that came next. You've got subsistence farming on one side, where you're basically just growing enough food to survive to feed your family, and on the other, you have this mechanized commercial farming that's all about making a profit. That massive difference is a direct result of the second agricultural revolution.
So, where did this revolution get its juice? From the Industrial Revolution. New inventions like the seed drill and the steel plow meant that suddenly you just didn't need as many people working on farms. So what happened to all those people? Well, they packed up and moved to the cities to work in the new factories. They became the workforce that powered industrialization. It's so important to get this. Without that farming boom, our modern city-based world, it just wouldn't exist.
And that brings us to the third big one, the Green Revolution. This one was all about science. Guys like Norman Borlaug figured out how to crossbreed plants. We're not talking about GMOs in a lab. That's a whole other thing that came later, to create these amazing high-yield miracle seeds for crops like wheat and rice. So you take this whole package, the seeds, the fertilizers, the irrigation, and you bring it to places like India and Mexico. The result? It was incredible. It stopped predicted famines in their tracks. But, and this is a big but, it came with some serious downsides. A lot of small farmers couldn't afford the new tech, and it kicked off some major environmental problems that we're still dealing with.
All right. That leads us right into Chapter 2. We've seen how farming changed over time. Now let's dig into why our rural landscapes look the way they do. Because believe me, it's not random. There's a real logic to why farms are where they are.
Just by looking at how people arrange their homes on the land, you can learn so much. You've got clustered settlements, where houses are all bunched together. Think of old European villages. That points to a history of community, maybe even a need for defense. Then you have dispersed patterns, where farms are spread way out, like in the American Midwest. That's all about individualism and owning big plots of land. And finally, you see these linear patterns, where everything is lined up along a road or a river, a super clear sign that transportation was everything.
This is such a cool way to see how governments literally draw lines on the map. You've got the meets and bounds system, which is very English. It uses natural landmarks like from the big oak tree to the creek, which creates these really weird, irregular shapes. Then you have the township and range system, which is super American. It's a rigid grid that gives us that perfect checkerboard pattern you see when you fly over the Midwest. And then there's the long lot system, from the French, which creates these long, skinny rectangles so that everyone gets a piece of the riverfront.
Okay, lock this one in because it's a huge concept, bid-rent theory. It sounds complicated, but the idea is actually super simple. The closer you are to the city, to the market, the more expensive the land is. The farther out you go, the cheaper it gets. So, if you're a farmer, you have a trade-off to make. Do you pay a ton for land close to the city to save on shipping costs? Or do you buy cheap land way out in the boonies and pay more to truck your stuff to market? This one economic idea, It explains so much.
And that trade-off is the key to understanding the von Thunen model. And trust me, the AP exam loves this model. It's all based on that bid-rent idea. So picture this. In the very center, you've got your city, the market. Right outside it, in Ring 1, you're going to find things like dairy and fresh vegetables. Why? Because they spoil fast and you need to get them to market ASAP. The next ring out, forestry. Wood is super heavy and expensive to haul, so you want it relatively close. Further out, you've got grains. They don't spoil and they're lighter, so transport isn't as big a deal. And what's in the very last ring, on the cheapest land farthest away? Ranching. Because hey, the cows can just walk themselves to market.
Okay, let's zoom out a bit. For Chapter 3, we're going to see how all these local patterns we've been talking about plug into a gigantic, interconnected global system for making and trading food.
Think about this. Everything you buy, whether it's the shirt on your back or the coffee you're drinking, has a story. It has a journey. We call that a commodity chain. Let's take that coffee. The beans might be grown in Brazil. Then they're processed, shipped to maybe Germany for roasting, and then finally sold in a cafe right here in the US. Every single step in that chain adds value and connects countries all over the world.
So you might be wondering, how do these massive companies get so powerful in this system? One of their biggest tools is something called vertical integration. It's when a single company owns a bunch of different steps in the commodity chain. So they don't just own the chicken farm. They also own the feed mill, the processing plant, the trucking company that delivers the chicken, and maybe even the brand you see in the grocery store. By controlling the whole shebang, they can make things way more efficient and cheap. But that power makes it almost impossible for a small family farm, which just controls that one little piece of the puzzle, to even compete. And that leads us to our last chapter, where we have to look at the consequences of all this. This super efficient global food system, well, it has some really big impacts, and it leaves us with some enormous challenges for the future.
Look, the fact that we can produce so much food is pretty amazing. But it has definitely come at a cost to the environment, a big cost. Things like desertification from too many animals grazing, or soil salinization. That's when irrigation leaves behind so much salt that the soil becomes useless. Then there's all the chemical runoff from fertilizers getting into our rivers and lakes. Not to mention deforestation when we clear land for more farms.
And this right here, this is really the core debate in farming today. You've got industrial agriculture on one side. It's been wildly successful at making tons and tons of cheap food using things like monocropping and chemical fertilizers. But then you have this growing push for more sustainable ways of doing things. You know, organic farming, local food movements, stuff that's better for the soil and for biodiversity. The big question is, how do we find the right balance? How do we feed everyone and take care of the planet for the long haul?
You know, this brings up a really important point about world hunger. A lot of people think the problem is that we just don't grow enough food, but that's not really true. We actually grow more than enough to feed everyone. The real problem is getting that food to the people who need it. It's about access. And you can even see this in rich countries. We have these places called food deserts, usually in poorer neighborhoods, where there are plenty of fast food joints and convenience stores, but not a single grocery store with fresh fruits and vegetables in sight.
Now, this is a really fascinating piece of data that often gets missed. The reality is, women are literally the backbone of the world's food system. In the developing world, they're about half of all farm labor. And in places like sub-Saharan Africa, it's as high as 80%. But here's the crazy part. Even though they do most of the work, they often can't even legally own the land they're farming.
Okay, let's pull this all together. If you're going to take away just 4 things, let it be these. 1, agriculture has been shaped by 3 huge revolutions. 2, the way we use land isn't random. It follows economic rules, like in the von Thunen model. 3, farming today is a totally global system that connects all of us. And 4, the biggest fights ahead are about making that system sustainable and fair.
So why should you care about all this? Well, here's a number to remember. This unit makes up a massive chunk of the AP Human Geo exam. If you can really nail the concepts we talked about, the agricultural revolutions, the von Thunen model, all that stuff about global food systems, you're going to be in really, really good shape. It's that important. Which kind of leaves us with the big, ultimate question, doesn't it? As we head towards a world with 10 billion people, how do we build a food system that works? One that's productive enough to feed everyone, fair to the people who grow our food, and sustainable for generations to come? I mean, this isn't just a test question. It's one of the biggest challenges our generation is ever going to face.